It started on a Monday morning, one of those calm, ordinary days where everything seems predictable. I was sipping coffee and scrolling through emails when I saw my monthly electric bill. I almost didn't open it at first, my usage was always about the same. But when I finally clicked the message and saw the number, I nearly spilled my coffee all over the table. $5,000. $5,000 for 1 month of electricity in a 3-bedroom house. My stomach dropped. For a second, I thought it had to be a mistake, a misplaced decimal point, or some computer glitch. I blinked at the screen again. Nope, it was real. I called the electric company right away, and after waiting on hold for nearly an hour, a tired-sounding representative came on the line. She confirmed that, yes, my bill was indeed accurate, at least, according to the data they had. She told me my home's meter had shown an enormous spike in usage for the past few weeks. The number was so absurd that even she admitted it didn't make sense. Maybe your HOA has added something new to the grid, she said cautiously. Do you share any power sources with them? That question stuck in my mind long after I hung up. I lived in a gated community run by an HOA that prided itself on being energy efficient. They controlled the lighting for the pool, the clubhouse, and all the common areas. I had always assumed the power for those amenities came from a separate account, but now I wasn't so sure. The more I thought about it, the more suspicious I became. A few months earlier, the HOA had announced a shared sustainability program where they upgraded the neighborhood's lighting to newer, energy-efficient models. They had assured homeowners that this would lower our costs. Yet here I was, staring at a bill that could pay for a small car. I decided to visit the HOA office that afternoon. When I walked in, the manager, a sharp-tongued woman named Brenda, gave me one of those tight, polite smiles that don't reach the eyes. "Mr. Reed, how can I help you?" she asked. I handed her the bill without saying a word. Her expression didn't change. "You might want to check your appliances," she said casually, pushing the paper back toward me. "Air conditioners, pool pumps, those things can really eat power." I stared at her, trying to read whether she was bluffing. "My appliances didn't suddenly start burning $5,000's worth of energy," I said evenly. "Something's wrong here." She folded her hands. "Well, the HOA recently installed new power monitors for the clubhouse and shared systems. Perhaps there's some crossover in the readings. But it's not really our department." Her tone was dismissive, but something in the way she said crossover made my skin prickle. "Can I see the power distribution map for the neighborhood?" I asked. "I want to know exactly what's connected to my meter." She gave a small, tight laugh. "Those are internal documents. Not for homeowners." That told me everything I needed to know. That night, I went out to the side of my house with a flashlight and opened the panel near my electric meter. I'd never looked too closely at it before. There were wires leading into the ground, but one thick conduit looked newer than the rest, wrapped with fresh tape and labeled with a marker. My curiosity turned into anger. Someone had clearly added a new line connecting to my meter box. I followed it across the yard toward the back fence and, to my disbelief, found it running underground toward the HOA clubhouse. I grabbed my phone, took photos, and sent them straight to a friend of mine named Lucas, who worked as an electrician. He came by the next day. After inspecting the setup, he whistled low. "Yeah, man. This is illegal as hell," he said. "They've definitely tapped into your line. Looks like whoever did this knew enough to hide it, but not enough to make it invisible to someone who knows what they're looking for." He explained that the clubhouse and pool lights were likely drawing power from my home's supply. That's why my usage had spiked so drastically. I felt my blood boil. The HOA, the same people who fined me for having my trash can out too long, were literally stealing electricity from me. When I called Brenda the next morning and told her what Lucas had found, she didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she said, "Mr. Reed, the shared system benefits everyone in the neighborhood. It's part of a community initiative." Her tone was icy, as if she was daring me to push further. "You can either be a team player or escalate this and risk increased fees. Your choice." That was the moment I realized just how corrupt they were. They thought they could bully me into silence, like they had with everyone else. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I spent the rest of the week gathering evidence, photos, bills, reports from Lucas, and even statements from a couple of neighbors who had noticed strange power surges too. When I approached them quietly, most were afraid to speak up. "They'll fine us," one woman whispered. "They always find something." But one elderly man down the street, Mr. Dawson, wasn't afraid. "You get them, son," he told me. "They've been ripping us off for years." By Friday, I had enough proof to make a solid case. But instead of going straight to the authorities, I decided to see what would happen if I took matters into my own hands first. I called another electrician, a licensed contractor this time, and asked him to reroute my main connection through a separate breaker box that I could control privately. It wasn't technically illegal since it was on my property, and it would give me the ability to shut down the HOA's stolen connection if I wanted. He installed it quietly that weekend. As soon as he left, I stood there in my garage, staring at the switch, the one that now gave me the power literally to expose them. My bill had been manipulated, my property tampered with, and they threatened me when I confronted them. I wasn't going to take it anymore. That night, I lay awake, the hum of the air conditioner barely audible over the quiet rage in my chest. $5,000. That was more than just money, it was a message. They wanted to show that they had control. But what they didn't realize was that I now knew exactly where their control came from and how easily I could take it away. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I made myself a silent promise. The next time they tried to lecture me about community responsibility, the next time Brenda sent one of her smug letters, or the next time they flicked on those bright clubhouse lights, I'd be ready. They wanted to play games with power, then they were about to learn what it felt like to live without it. The next morning, I woke up to another reminder of how deep this mess had gotten. The HOA newsletter sat neatly in my mailbox, printed on glossy paper with fake smiles and hollow words about community harmony. I tossed it aside as I opened the envelope containing my second electric bill, an additional $2,000 added in back adjustments. My heart pounded as I read the fine print: excess power usage attributed to community allocation per HOA agreement. That was the moment I knew Brenda and her board weren't just stealing, they were doubling down. They wanted to bury me in fees, to intimidate me into silence. They thought I would just pay and move on like everyone else they bullied before. But they underestimated how far I was willing to go. I spent that entire day digging deeper. Lucas came back in the afternoon, bringing tools and a small drone with a thermal camera. We decided to map the underground lines around the property to see just how far their tampering went. The results were worse than I imagined. The feed from my meter wasn't just running to the clubhouse, it was split in two directions. One conduit led toward the tennis courts, and the other toward the HOA office itself. My power was feeding their entire operation. I couldn't believe the audacity. Every time they held one of their smug evening meetings under the glowing lights of the clubhouse, they were doing it on my dime. Lucas shook his head as he reviewed the footage. They must be installed this during one of those maintenance upgrades, he said. It's clean enough that it would pass casual inspection. I'd bet they've been routing power from other homes too. You might not be the only one. That idea lit a fire inside me. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about all of us who'd been paying for their arrogance. I grabbed my phone and started calling a few neighbors. Most were hesitant to talk, their voices low and wary, but when I showed them the evidence, the fear in their tone turned into quiet anger. A few of them confessed they'd noticed small spikes in their bills too. Brenda and her board had created a system built on control, intimidation, and greed. I decided to pay the HOA office another visit, this time recording everything. When I walked in, Brenda was sitting behind her desk, typing on her computer like nothing was wrong. I placed a folder on the desk filled with printed photos, thermal maps, and signed statements. Care to explain this? I asked. She barely glanced at it. Mr. Reed, if you continue harassing the board with these baseless accusations, we'll be forced to take legal action against you for defamation. Her words were cold, rehearsed, and dripping with condescension. You should be thanking us for keeping this neighborhood in order, she added, smirking slightly. That smirk broke something in me. You've been stealing power from residents for months, I snapped. You think you can threaten me after that? You're done. Her face hardened. Be careful, Daniel, she said slowly. You're not the first homeowner who thought they could take on the HOA. You won't win. I left the office shaking with rage but also a strange sense of determination. I wasn't scared anymore. That night, I sat in my garage with the new breaker box glowing faintly in the dim light. Every hum of the wires felt like a taunt. Brenda and her group had no idea I now had full control over the system they were abusing. I could see their power usage in real time through the monitor Lucas had helped install. Around 8 p.m. the clubhouse lights flared on, just like they always did. I watched as the numbers on my meter jumped. They were hosting another meeting, probably planning their next move. I opened my laptop and pulled up the footage from the thermal drone again, tracing each line and confirming my control points. The HOA had no backup generator, no separate source. They were entirely dependent on the main feed, the one they had illegally connected to my home. The more I thought about it, the more poetic it felt. They had built their authority on power, literal and figurative, and I now held the switch that could end it all. But before I did anything drastic, I wanted to be absolutely certain I was in the right. I called the county utilities inspector early the next morning and requested a site audit, pretending I'd noticed unusual readings in my system. The inspector showed up by noon, clipboard in hand. I led him to the side of the house, where he spent nearly an hour testing and tracing. When he finally turned to me, his expression said everything. This isn't right, he said. Someone's definitely tapped into your line. You'll want to contact the police. I thanked him, took his written report, and added it to my growing folder of evidence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, the house silent except for the faint ticking of the clock, and thought about every conversation, every smug glance Brenda had given me. They had no idea what was coming. Around midnight, I noticed the familiar glow from the clubhouse lights through my window. The meter on my monitor spiked again. That was it. My hand hovered over the switch, and for a brief moment, I hesitated. Then I remembered Brenda's words, "You won't win." I flipped the switch. Instantly, the entire block went dark. The soft hum of power vanished. From my window, I could see flashlights flicker on in the clubhouse, confused voices echoing faintly through the night air. I stepped outside, the cool breeze hitting my face as I watched the chaos unfold from a distance. A few seconds later, I heard shouting Brenda's unmistakable voice rising above the others. "What's happening? Why is everything off?" Someone tried to start a generator, but it sputtered uselessly. The neighborhood was completely still except for the sound of angry HOA members stumbling around in the dark. For once, they weren't the ones in control. I stood there, arms crossed, as the realization spread among them that their precious office, pool, and meeting hall had lost power, all because the man they tried to cheat had finally fought back. It was strange how quiet victory felt. No fireworks, no celebration, just the soft hum of justice done in silence. I waited a few minutes before turning my lights back on, making sure the rest of the neighborhood remained dark. The message was clear enough. They could play their little power games, but now they learned who really had control. I knew it wouldn't take long for them to figure out what had happened, but I didn't care. I had the evidence, the county report, and the truth on my side. The next morning, Brenda sent a furious email to all homeowners, claiming there had been a temporary technical disruption due to maintenance. I couldn't help but laugh. Within an hour, Lucas texted me, "You really did it, didn't you?" I just replied with a simple line, "They had it coming." But even as the sun rose over the quiet neighborhood, I knew this wasn't over. The HOA would try to retaliate. People like Brenda didn't just give up, they doubled down. But this time, I had every document, every photo, every recording ready to expose them completely. They had stolen power from me, lied to my face, and threatened me to stay quiet. Now I had taken their power away literally and legally, and it was only a matter of time before everyone saw them for what they truly were. The morning after the blackout, the neighborhood felt different. The air was still heavy, as if the power outage had left behind more than darkness, it had cracked something in the foundation of the HOA's control. For the first time in years, there was silence around the clubhouse. No early morning sprinklers, no humming AC units, no self-important chatter of board members. I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the street as Brenda's shiny white SUV pulled up, its headlights the only bright thing in sight. She climbed out with her phone pressed to her ear, barking orders to someone, her face red with frustration. I didn't need to hear her to know what she was saying. She was in full panic mode. Within an hour, 2 electricians and a utility truck were parked outside the HOA office. They spent a long time circling the property, checking breaker boxes and wires. I knew they wouldn't find what they were looking for because I had already disconnected the illegal line and locked my circuit. The HOA's offices, clubhouse, and pool area were dead. No lights, no air conditioning, no Wi-Fi. I could see Brenda pacing by the door, her sunglasses hiding eyes that probably hadn't seen sleep all night. The irony was sweet. They had stolen power for months, and now, they were literally powerless. Lucas stopped by around noon, trying his best not to grin too widely. "They look like ants running around after their hill's been kicked," he said, sipping his soda. "You really flipped the switch on them." I laughed, but deep down, I knew the game wasn't over yet. Brenda wasn't the type to admit defeat quietly. She was a woman who built her authority on fear, and losing control wasn't something she would let slide. I had no doubt she'd try to turn this back on me somehow. I just needed to be ready. That readiness came in the form of a thick binder sitting on my dining table. Inside it were the county inspector's report, photos of the power diversion lines, screenshots of my electric meter logs, and audio recordings of my last conversation with Brenda. Everything was labeled and time-stamped. Lucas helped me organize it, even adding a digital copy to a flash drive just in case. "You've got enough evidence here to shut down the entire HOA," he said, flipping through the pages. I smiled slightly. "That's the plan." By the afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email from the HOA, "Emergency board meeting tonight, attendance mandatory for all homeowners." The irony almost made me laugh out loud. They wanted a meeting when they didn't even have power. Still, I knew I had to show up. It was time to end this face-to-face. When I arrived that evening, the parking lot was half full, the sun already dipping behind the trees. Homeowners stood around in small groups, murmuring among themselves. The clubhouse was dark except for a few battery-powered lanterns scattered across folding tables. The air inside was thick with heat and tension. Brenda stood at the front with two board members, her arms crossed, her voice sharp as she called the meeting to order. "As you all know," she began, "someone deliberately tampered with our electrical system last night, causing a complete power failure." Her tone carried that familiar fake concern, the same one she used whenever she was trying to manipulate people. "We're investigating who's responsible and will pursue full legal consequences." I raised my hand before she could continue. "You mean the system that was illegally connected to private power lines?" The room went quiet. Brenda's smile twitched, but she tried to keep her composure. "Mr. Reed, this isn't the time for accusations," she said through clenched teeth. "We're trying to restore order." I stepped forward, holding up the folder. "Order? You've been stealing power from my property for months." The county inspector confirmed it. "I've got his report right here." Murmurs filled the room. A few neighbors gasped. Brenda's mask finally slipped, her face draining of color. "That's absurd," she stammered. "We've done no such thing." I opened the folder and spread the documents across the table for everyone to see. "Here's the thermal scan showing the line running directly from my meter to your office. Here's the inspector's written statement. And here's the HOA billing record showing thousands in unauthorized charges." I looked around at the crowd, their faces a mix of shock and anger. "You've all been paying inflated fees because your HOA board decided to make my house their power source." The silence was suffocating. One of the board members, a man named Carl, stepped back, clearly realizing he'd been caught up in something much bigger than he thought. Brenda's hands trembled as she pointed at me. "You cut our power. You vandalized HOA property," she shouted. I met her glare. "I shut off my own power line. You were the ones trespassing on it. You want to call the police? Go ahead, I already did." Almost as if on cue, two county utility officials entered the room, clipboards in hand. "I contacted them earlier to attend the meeting. We've verified Mr. Reed's claims," one of them announced. "The HOA's electrical system was illegally connected to his residential power line. This is a clear violation of county code and state law." The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Brenda's defiance melted into visible panic. She looked around for support, but even her board members wouldn't meet her eyes. As the officials continued explaining the violations and potential penalties, I just stood there, arms folded, watching her crumble. For months, she had threatened, lied, and manipulated everyone around her. Now, in front of the entire community, she had nothing left. No excuses, no control, no power. Literally and figuratively. The meeting ended with the county declaring an immediate investigation. Brenda was suspended pending legal review, and the HOA was temporarily dissolved until an interim board could be formed. People began leaving in stunned silence, some stopping to shake my hand or thank me for exposing the truth. I just nodded, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. It was finally over. Later that night, I drove past the clubhouse one last time. It was still dark, the windows empty, the pool still. The sign that once read HOA office, residents only hung crookedly from one chain, swaying slightly in the breeze. The street lights flickered back on, powered correctly this time. For the first time in a long while, the neighborhood felt peaceful. I parked my car in the driveway, the same spot where months earlier I'd first noticed something was off with my bill. Back then, I'd felt small against the weight of an entire system built to silence people like me. But standing there now, looking at my house glowing softly in the dark, I realized that taking back power, literal and symbolic, wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. About showing that no matter how much control someone thinks they have, the truth always finds a way to break through. As I stepped inside, I caught a faint reflection of myself in the window. Behind me, the street was calm, the houses dim but steady. I poured a drink, sat down, and let the quiet fill the space where anger used to live. Somewhere down the street, I imagined Brenda sitting in her powerless home, stewing in the darkness she'd created. The irony wasn't lost on me. In the end, she'd learned the same lesson every tyrant eventually does: when you build your empire on stolen power, it only takes one switch to bring it all crashing down.